So when validation becomes the only thing you're looking for, that's where narcissistic tendencies creep in. We talk a lot about self-love, validating yourself, seeing yourself, which is good. And honestly, that work saved my life. But what happens when it goes too far? Hi, I'm Taryn. I am a therapist and intimacy and couples coach, a South Asian mother in a biracial marriage, and just a human trying to exist in this complicated world. So I think a lot about relationships, a lot, probably too much. And today I want to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. We live in a world where ChatGPT can be your therapist. I get it, it's available at 2 a.m. It doesn't judge you, it always validates you, and it's free. To be honest, I use it a lot too. And that's exactly the problem. Is there a world where over self-validation becomes your own blind spot? I think there is. And I think a lot of us are already there. And I think we should be looking into that a little bit more carefully and more seriously, including me. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I grew up with a father who loved me, but who was very focused on my future and my financial security and the fact that I do good in the future, like most South Asian dads. Because I didn't have a mom growing up, that felt overbearing because he couldn't really see me and my gifts and what my needs were. He was focused on, will I be okay in the future? And in South Asian culture, validation is not really a thing. It's like, don't let it get in your head. Like, why should we tell you how good you are? What good is that gonna do? Telling you what you're not good at is at least gonna help you get better at that. You know, that's the mindset. And humility is a huge virtue, and to be humble and not to just to be silently good at everything. And you know, if you're good at that part's just taken care of. And in that environment, validation becomes conditional and criticism becomes the norm. That scarcity of validation wasn't just from my father, but it was lacking in the world around me because I wasn't given the opportunities to thrive in, for example, my creativity. As being a bit dyslexic, I had some issues with school, which obviously didn't help because I wasn't given an opportunity to thrive in other places like art or dance or other things that I was really good at. And so I just didn't get validation from anywhere. And so, of course, that really impacted my sense of self, including the traumas that I had already. Once I started my healing, of course, I came to validation. I validated myself, and validation became my medicine, and it needed to be. And that was the first time I really saw my creativity, saw my potential, and how a negative self-belief just impacted the reality. Validating myself, I noticed that my world started to change, and that was really powerful. And it was genuinely beautiful for my process. But here's what I want to tell you first about research that I found around over-validation. There was this beautiful, beautiful research about praising kids and how that impacts them. When you tell a child they're smart, they build their whole identity around that. Of course, telling our kids they're smart looked at as a positive thing. It's something we want our kids to have a sense of self. But what actually ended up happening was these kids were given a bunch of tests and a bunch of tasks, and they noticed when they failed, they lied. They even cheated, and they avoided the challenge altogether because the stakes just felt too existential. Their whole sense of self was on the line. If I'm not smart, then what am I, right? But what they found was really cool. When kids were praised for effort, for being resourceful, for trying, for being very adaptable, for solving problems well, they saw failure as information, and they didn't lie. Their identity wasn't threatened by that. It didn't challenge their sense of self. So I had to ask myself, are we validating ourselves for who we actually are or for what we're performing? That's the uncomfortable question. If we're not validating ourselves, then how do we see ourselves? How do we feel more confident? That's the question. Here's what nobody talks about in healing. So we do so much work on validation, right? And we should, but we forget to expand our capacity to be with shame. Now, how does shame come in the middle of all of this? So if you weren't good at getting good grades or doing good at whatever was in front of you, you were shamed, and usually shamed was used to actually make some changes. But that's not what actually ended up happening. Shame came inside and told a story that we're actually not good, we're wrong, and we're unlovable. And if we've been validating ourselves and we're trying to finally find our comfort of being in our skin, well, then shame threatens that. But the reality is, shame is just an emotion. It passes and it can be alchemized. And when you can sit with shame and you move through it without love being taken away from you, being loved for making a mistake, for being not as good at something, that's where the real healing happens. It's the capacity to feel an uncomfortable emotion. It's just an emotion that passes by. It allows us to hold that reality. We've done something wrong while being in connection with somebody else and still be loved for who we are. How do you stay with shame and guilt without it overwhelming your system, without you running away from it because it's just too much? Instead, hey, is there a truth here? Is there a place for me to grow here? Or can I just say, no, this is not who I am? Can I at moments have places to grow and still be okay, still be lovable if that's the case, still be worthy if that's the case? So what does that mean? What am I really talking about? So when validation becomes the only thing you're looking for, that's where narcissistic tendencies creep in. And I say this with compassion because it makes complete sense when you've been starved of being seen and what you want is validation and a sense of self, right? And to have confidence and a feeling of worthiness. But what starts to happen is the world gets divided into two kinds of people. My people who see me, who validate me, who get me, and everyone else who are wrong, who are bad, who don't get it, who are trying to make me feel bad about myself. And that's a really closed way of living because you're putting all the responsibility for your comfort into other people so that you don't feel shame, so that you don't feel bad about yourself in case there are any mistakes, any places of growth. And what's really happening is you're losing resilience in that process. Life will keep putting you in rooms where you're not the center. And the question is, can you stay in those rooms? ChatGPT will always validate you. It's programmed to. I use it, I love it, but I've had to learn to take it with a grain of salt because its purpose is to agree with you, not to grow you. As a mom, I think about this constantly because I want my son to feel seen and celebrated and confident. But what am I validating him for? Is it for being smart, which he is, or for being resourceful? Because what happens if he's not the smartest person in the room? How can he move through that challenge? Does he start feeling small and sad, or does he move on and start to figure out how to find his unique talents and how to persevere when he's not the smartest person in the room? Is it for being bright and being energetic, or being adaptable even on the days when he's not? Because my son is not always going to be on. He's not always going to be the brightest one in the room, even though I think he is. And that's okay. And that's human. So what I want for him is to be okay in every room, not just the ones where he's being celebrated, right? That's the identity I want him to build. That's the resilience I want him to have. So I'm not saying stop validating yourself. If you're early in your healings, validate hard and often. This conversation is not for you yet, and that's okay. But if you've been on the journey for a while and something keeps showing up, the same patterns, the same conflicts. Maybe it's worth getting curious about your blind spots because life is constantly trying to mirror it back to you. I'm going to be here talking about motherhood, intimate relationships, healing, personal development, with a little objectivity, a little different perspective, and probably some rambling. So I'm a therapist with a lot of wisdom, I think, and a lot of blind spots as well. Expressing myself helps me quite a bit, and if it helps you, that's just a win-win. So if this landed, follow. We're gonna go deep, and I'm excited to have you on the journey with us. Bye!